Welcome back to the ReThink podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Friend. We are continuing with part two of our brand new series entitled Protest, Power, and Progress, What Nonviolent Direct Action Can Do. As you embark with us on the six-part journey, you will discover how you can go from protest to power to change and to community. Each episode of the six-part series is designed to help you learn about the principles and steps of nonviolence and how to strategically apply them for sustainable social change. Today, we will be privy to a conversation about economic and racial injustice in the United States and the things that have been done to create the racial wealth gap that persists today. We will also talk about the steps to take to improve these conditions and how we create sustainable and equitable changes in our policies that can help to ensure a more just reality for all. In 1966, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "It is easy to conceive of a plan to raise the minimum wage and thus in a single stroke extract millions of people from poverty. But between the conception and the realization, there lies a formidable wall. Someone has been profiting from the low wages of Negroes. Depressed living standards for Negroes are a structural part of the economy. Certain industries are based upon a supply of low wage, underskilled, and immobile non-white behavior. Hand assembly factories, hospitals, service industries, housework, agricultural operations using itinerant labor would all suffer shock, if not disaster, if the minimum wage were significantly raised. A hardening of opposition to the satisfaction of the Negro needs must be anticipated as the movement presses against financial privilege." You see, that the theory of economic freedom for Black Americans has been discussed for well over a century. Yet the Black community remains the poorest in America. Since the inception of the chattel slave trade, Black African people have been forced to endure much harsher standards relative to their counterparts. To help us to navigate this conversation, we have the one and only former mayor of Stockton, California, Michael D. Tubbs. Michael Tubbs is the special advisor to California Governor Gavin Newsom for economic mobility and opportunity, the founder of Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, and the founder of End Poverty in California. In 2016, he was elected mayor of Stockton at just 26 years old. He was the city's first African-American mayor and the youngest mayor of any major city in American history. As mayor, Tubbs was lauded for his leadership and innovation. He raised over $20 million to create the Stockton Scholars, a universal scholarship and mentorship program for Stockton students. Additionally, he piloted the first mayor-led guaranteed income pilot in the country. Under his leadership, Stockton was named an All-American City in 2017 and in 2018 by the National Civic League. The city saw a 40% drop in homicides in 2018 and 2019, led the state of California in the decline of officer-involved shootings in 2019, and was named the second most fiscally healthy city in California. Additionally, it was recognized as one of the most fiscally healthy cities in the nation and was featured in an HBO documentary film, Stockton on My Mind. Tubbs has been named a fellow at the Harvard Institute of Politics and the MIT Media Lab, a member of Fortune's Top 40 Under 40, Forbes 30 Under 30 All-Star alumni, the most valuable mayor by the nation, the 2019 New Frontier Award winner from the JFK Library, and the 2021 Civic Leadership Award winner from the King Center. Prior to his tenure as mayor, Tubbs served as a council member for the city of Stockton, District 6, a high school educator, and a fellow for the Stanford Design School and Emerson Collective. On November 16, 2021, Tubbs released The Deeper the Roots, a memoir of hope and home, published by the Flatiron Books imprint, an Oprah book. The book, which the LA Times described as intimate and insightful, not only relates Tubbs' story of growing up in poverty, but lays his vision for leadership and policy that is more empathetic and responsive to people who are struggling. Please welcome former mayor of Stockton, California, Michael D. Tubbs.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm sorry for that super long bio.
No, it's great. No, I think the people need to know about all the work that you've done, and we're really appreciative. Obviously, the King Center, our CEO, Dr. Perdise King, of your participation. This is not your first time working with us, and so we are always thrilled to have you. And you are just really, truly one of the most influential members of even just the millennial generation in the work that you've been able to accomplish so far. And so we really are deeply appreciative of this, and we look forward to the conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always an honor to do anything with the King Center.
Absolutely. Well, to get started, your work on economic policy in your time as mayor of Stockton has been well documented. What inspired you to make the issue of economic justice so prevalent in your time as mayor? And how were you able to create such a fiscally healthy environment for your citizens?
Yeah, I think part of it was just growing up in Stockton and growing up in poverty and growing up around a lot of people in poverty. And then going to college and realizing that the poverty I experienced wasn't a result of the failure of my parents and my neighborhood and my friends and their parents, but they're actually structural systemic failures. And that government may not have all the answers, but at least has the answer to rectify the harms that it caused. And when I was mayor, we spent so much time talking about educational attainment or homelessness or crime. But the root cause of all these things was just pervasive economic insecurity and endemic poverty. So I said, if we do nothing else, we're going to make our administration the anti poverty and pro opportunity administration. And we just thought about ways to do that. So for sure, we did sort of the guaranteed income work, which is important. We also did other things. We started the first childhood savings account that became a model for the state's largest childhood savings account. In the first in San Joaquin County, we did a lot with entrepreneurs and small businesses and figured out sort of which of the regulations could we get rid of so that it wasn't hard for people to start businesses. We started business accelerators and brought those folks in to our downtown. We started a Juneteenth capital initiative where I brought together some of the wealthiest people in the city and the banks to create a fund of money specifically for Black-owned businesses and Black entrepreneurs. And also with the mentorship coaching and access to procurement opportunities. So it was always about just how do we increase opportunity for people? Because I think it's just a lie we've been taught that people don't want to work or that people don't have ideas or that people don't want to be entrepreneurial. In fact, I cause the opposite. And then to the second part of your question about the fiscal health, I just try to keep it really simple. I think our North Star when it came to budgeting was that we spend one-time money on one-time things with maximum impact, and we spend ongoing money on ongoing needs. So we didn't, if something needed a 5-year commitment, we didn't do it until we had 5 years worth of money. And also took being creative. So we did a lot of public-private partnerships because when I was elected to city council, the city had just declared bankruptcy. So we didn't have a lot of money. And because of that, I had to look for philanthropists and business people to help create some of these programs.
Wow. Well, it's so interesting that you're even saying this. And so I think, Michael, one of the things that I think a lot of people are confused about is there's always this association with crimes in community, but there's a disassociation with economic injustice and even poverty. Why do you feel like, even as you're talking about your work, why do you feel like there's been such a disconnect for people between, well, if you have crime and you have people that are suffering, then typically is related to the fact that there's an economic disparity. Why is economics so left out of the conversation around that?
Yeah, I think it's just willful ignorance. I think it's easier for us to come. It's the solutions are more palatable and easier politically if the answer is just some people are born bad, some people are born criminals, some people just need to be locked up. That's a very easy answer than the answer of some people have been locked out of opportunity. So we have to redirect and rectify that and create more opportunity. That creates a different set of policy um, remedies that oftentimes people are loath to accept, and it's a little bit more harder because you have to think creatively. You have to, resources are finite in many cases, so you have to like set priorities and allocate resources in ways that may be different to how resources have been allocated and priorities have been set previously. So I think that's really what it is. I think it's all, and also if it's an economic issue, then we're all culpable versus just an individual issue. And then yes, of course, sometimes there are people who do bad things, who deserve to be, who need consequences and accountability for creating harms. And no one's disagreeing with that. I think the point of our conversation is to talk about how our society, our economy is structured for violence. That there's a pervasive structural violence, and that we are all culpable in the environments that create the conditions that cause people to choose to make antisocial decisions that lead to crime.
That's just such a fascinating reality, and I think that's just such a good introduction into this conversation. There are some studies, Michael, that show that white Americans make 73% more in their annual income, and they're 28 more times likely to become millionaires than Black Americans. Some studies also show that white Americans are 2 times as likely than Black Americans to own their own homes. And so the question of how to share wealth and eliminate poverty have long been asked, and there are some solutions that have been offered. But why do you think this issue had yet to be rectified? And what do you think it says about our country that the wealth gap has worsened as the decades have gone on?
Yeah, well, what's interesting about America and about sort of particularly the work of Dr. King and others has been always tying the fight for human rights and dignity to a fight for economic rights, or civil rights being married to civil rights. And this idea that we have a country whose wealth has been built on 400 plus years of chattel slavery and human trafficking, where everything was labor was free. The biggest cost for any business is labor. So 400 years of free labor, from everything from childcare to harvesting crops to plant, like it's just an incredible evil, but it created incredible wealth for some people. And then after that, to have folks locked out, to have a government invest in some people, not others. The government gives some people land, and we know in our country, land creates wealth. Some people got land through government actions and others didn't. Some people got New Deal benefits and others didn't. Some people got GI benefits and others didn't. You create a problem where these disparities we see aren't acts of God. They're literally acts of fallen and evil men who create these evil policies. And I would also say that what we're saying and what people are saying isn't to be like a hater, or isn't about jealousy. It's about, wow, we've seen this tool, this engine, these policies work for one group of people to create the advantage that they have today. Why can't we do, minus slavery, the other policies to help the folks that have been left out, but not left out because they don't work hard? No, they've worked the hardest. We built the country. And it's really about how do we just make government work for Black people like it works for white people, but the difference being without specifically harming or targeting white people. Because I don't think anyone wants that. People just want their fair share. It's like we've seen the government work. We've seen the government create wealth. We've seen the government create opportunity, and we've always been on the opposite side of that. So can government for once work for us and give us the opportunity to build wealth too? And I'm being passionate because it seems so obvious, but elusive.
So, Michael, maybe you can help me understand, because as somebody who has done this work in a different way, and I've watched what you've done for years, the people who were most poor in this country in 1619 were Black Americans that were brought over here for chattel slavery. The people who are most poor in this country today are also Black Americans. So we have 400 years of a consistency that the people who were the most wealthy at the time, 400 years ago, are the same people who are most wealthy now. So do you feel like this was intentionally done? And if so, how do we begin to help people understand that it was done on purpose, and then to help them to rethink how we should think about this issue going forward?
100% intentionally done. If you look at the other group who's the poorest in this country, it's Native and Indigenous people who had their land stolen and had most of their people killed in acts of genocide. So and I think in the question lies the answer. One thing's been consistent for 400 years. Government has continued to make laws that have benefited historically and currently a specific group of people. And even today, even if the laws are colorblind, There's things they do in terms of property taxes and which groups are more or tax deductions and which groups are more likely to own. Like there's ways in which the law has been codified to reproduce the structural advantage that white Americans have enjoyed in this country from the beginning. And until that same level of intent and deliberate action is done on behalf of, we're in this conversation talking about Black Americans, but and then for in other oppressed groups as well, but for this conversation, Black Americans, we'll continue to see the disparities. And again, that's why, and to your point, that's why the conversation we're having about reparations is so important, because I think folks don't even know the history. So we can't get to the repair until there's been an acknowledgement of the harm. And we have to do the work of educating this country just about how you became a superpower. How did you become from a new country just 250 years ago to the country like running stuff on the world stage? Like, how did that happen? It happened because you stole land from Native people and killed a lot of them. It happened because you had 400 years of free labor. And then after that, convict labor through Jim Crow. And after that, you extracted wealth from communities. And when Black folks finally got something, you burned their cities down. You burned their towns out. You took their land. You took, like, repeatedly, right? Like, and then you also forced Chinese and Asian folks and Latinos and other folks. It's the same thing. Working for zero wages, doing dangerous work, working for very little. So but until that history is taught and understood and added to this myth of American exceptionalism, we'll continue to bang our head on the wall because there's also it's a numbers game that, like, Black folks have always are 10% to 12% of the country all the time. And you need 50% to get anything done. So Black folks in and of themselves aren't going to be enough to create the change that needs to happen. So we need to educate our brothers and sisters in other races about how repairing these harms doesn't just help Black people. It helps all of us. Yeah. It helps all of us when more talent is unleashed. It helps all of us when there's less poverty. It helps all of us when more folks have opportunities and more folks have a stake in the system, and more people believe the system is legitimate. They believe that the country is legitimate. They believe the laws are legitimate. And today that's not the case, because there's, again, 400 years of evidence of it working great for some people and working terribly and adversely working and extracting from other people.
Wow. You touched on a really key word there, Michael, and it's reparations. Now, reparations is a buzzword for so many people because it suggests, as you stated, handouts are to be made to people who are quote unquote undeserving. But when we look at recent American history, we see that reparations were given to Native Americans via reservation, even though that is clearly not enough. Reparations were also given to Japanese prisoners as they were unjustly placed in prison camps during World War II. And even Germany was forced to pay back reparations for their action during the World Wars. Yet Black Americans have had no true substantial conversation around reparations since we first set foot on this land. And so do you see reparations as something that must happen for economic justice to reach the Black community? And if so, what would that look like for you as you begin that exploration?
Yeah, well, I've talked to folks like in South Africa who were part of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and other folks. My state of California is the first state to have a reparations report and study. And I think just for national healing and to move forward, that there has to be some sort of repair for the harms that have been caused, because these harms are still reproducing themselves in the present, which create a lot of the issues we see today. But I think there's multi-layered step from my understanding of reparations, right? So I think I was talking to folks in California about this the other day. Like, the cash payment part is going to be hard, maybe necessary, should definitely be debated and studied. But let's just not focus there at first. Like, we could do a whole lot of work if we just looked at the policies on the books, the laws on the books, the procedures on the books that have created such disparities and continue to lock some people out of opportunity. And if we just did that, would be a huge step forward as to where we need to go. But I think we also have to have the conversation. But like I said previously, folks have to be educated, because right now the idea is that, oh, my ancestors didn't do anything, so why should I have to pay? Or my ancestors, or I wasn't around for that, why should I have to pay? And it's not about a punishment It's about an investment in a future that's unsheltered or untethered to the dystopian past that created the present. Like it's really about where are the investments we can make so that our future, we're not having the same disparities we had 400 years ago. And I think when it's framed and folks are educated that way, folks are much more open to the conversation. But it's an upward battle, but it's a fight we have to have. You can't have, like, it just makes no sense to me to have these ideals we speak of and have models and examples, not just in America, but around the world, of folks being given reparations for harms that have been committed, and say that for some reason, Black folks in America aren't even worthy of having the debate or conversation. There's something insidious about that.
There's something that you said, Michael, and I think the word is restitution. Like this is restorative. There's something that we're having a conversation about because often, Michael, when people have conversations outside of the Black community about reparation, it's similar to what you just noted. Well, what did I do to deserve this? So are you going to take from me to give to somebody else? Well, number one, that's just not how it works. But then also number two, I think as you laid out, well, the country has taken from Black people for centuries. And so we are simply saying that there's something that needs to be done to restore what was taken from the Black community. And reparations is a part of the conversation of restorative justice, meaning that you already had something and it was taken from you. Just simple as if you owned a home and your insurance company is supposed to help you rebuild the house if something were to happen to it. So we're asking to have something restored back to the community. So I think that's such a really salient point that you made. And,
yeah, and so, also, I think folks don't understand this is not just like the 400 years of slavery. Like there's people alive today that had their homes burned down in North Carolina or in Oklahoma or in other cities because there was thriving Black middle class. There's in California, there was a family who folks owned a beach, and that beach was stolen from them, and they just got it back. In Palm Springs, there's folks now who had a plot of land that was undesirable, Black folks, and now it's worth millions of dollars, and the brother pushed off the land, and they want their land back. Like there's like countless examples of, or you look at the prison system. Like there's just countless examples of wealth being redlining, restricted covenants, the ways in which real estate agents and brokers would charge double for terrible housing for Black folks in these neighborhoods. Like there's just countless examples of wealth literally being taken from Black folks and from the Black community. And the idea of reparations is that we have to give it back. And I also think there's a spiritual dimension to this. Like I am spiritual person, and I do believe that God is the God of justice. And I think justice demands a repair for harms. I think as a nation that prides itself or purports to be a Christian nation, we should be first in line for having a conversation of how do we really atone for the sins of the past? How do we really walk in forgiveness and reconciliation? But that can't happen with this historical amnesia. That can't happen with this sort of hyper individualistic ideals. And that can't happen without a true reckoning for, again, harms past and present that have been committed. I mean, like, even looking at sort of beyond the economy. In like the 60s, the amount of Black leaders, including the one whose namesake is on the center, who were murdered and embedded in part by our government. Like think about that. Like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Huey, like Fred Hampton, like and countless others assassinated, murdered, killed, and embedded in or enabled in part by our government. Like that's just like true evil warfare and subjugation of one's own citizens that has to be atoned for. Like I just don't see how anyone thinks we could just keep going. Like we'll never be able to get to where we're supposed to go if we don't atone for what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned Dr. King. You know, Dr. King was a proponent of the guaranteed annual income or universal basic income. So with that in mind, the work that he did and the work that you've been doing and where we are currently and where we need to go, how are you and others working to make the UBI a reality? And how do you believe the UBI will help to close the racial wealth gap?
Yeah, I learned about guaranteed income or universal basic income in reading Dr. King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, where he talked about how he had spent a lot of time thinking about the issue of poverty. And that part of the issue is that we use pygmy siloed mechanisms and we try to solve poverty by solving for housing or healthcare or education. He said all those things are important, but none of those things solve the issue, which is lack of cash. I remember reading as a college student and saying it'd be really cool one day to be part of the conversation about how to make that reality. And then when I became mayor, we had an opportunity to really address poverty. And I said, well, we have to try this idea of a guaranteed income. So now we have 150 mayors across the country, 40 county officials across the country who have joined in mayors and counties for guaranteed income. In fact, Chicago, where Dr. King did extensive work for the Poor People's Campaign, the commissioner, Tony Prantwinkle, has one of the largest guaranteed income programs in the country, in LA County as well. So it's really about a conversation around sort of an income floor and ending poverty. But what I've learned for the last 2 years is that income is important, but income isn't wealth. So while we need a guaranteed income or universal basic income to stabilize and allow folks to pay for necessities, folks just don't want to survive, they want to thrive. So we've also been doing work through End Poverty in California and thinking about wealth. Like once we get the basic income, once we get the guaranteed income, how do we make sure the next generation has some wealth? Now they have a floor to stand on. So we even talk about things like baby bonds, which would be sort of an account the government would put money in to so that when kids turn 18, they would have a nest egg and something with which to pay for college, pay for a down payment, et cetera, et cetera. And that's been shown to help end the racial wealth gap in one generation. So I think those are complementary strategies that have to work side by side. And other wealth building things, so like grants for small businesses, making it easy to start a small business, et cetera. So yeah, but guaranteed income, I think, is an important first step, and we've seen the country try it with the child tax credit. Newsflash, it worked. Cut child poverty. People were happy. No one threw their checks away. No one burned their checks. No one protested their checks. Republicans and Democrats got checks. Black and white people got checks. Asian people, yellow, Latino people, everyone liked their checks. So there's a model that we just have to build upon and push to make happen.
Yeah, and can you just even explain, because you brought up something I feel like would be really good for educational standpoint. Can you define what exactly wealth is? Because you also said it's distinct from income.
Yeah, let me try to get a short answer for it. That's a great question. I think the best analog is like income is for today, but you can't pass that on usually. Wealth is about the future, and you can pass that on. Income requires like active maintenance. Wealth is something that income doesn't compound the way wealth does. So income is static and wealth compounds, meaning that you put something like the accounts, you put in an account, since you don't have to spend it today, it's able to accrue interest and make more money. So I think that's the biggest. That's probably the biggest difference in my best attempt at a definition.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we appreciate that. I think that'll be extremely helpful for people. Our last question for today is Dr. King's nonviolent philosophy and methodology includes 6 principles and 6 steps. One of the principles is the universe, as you mentioned earlier, the universe is on the side of justice. We believe that it is our work to be on the same side as the universe. So for you, how is making economic justice a reality, a moral and also a spiritual imperative for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do everything in the book, but I know I look at the words in red when they say Jesus said this. And one of the things he said in red was, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was in prison, did you come visit me? As you do unto the least of these, you do literally unto me, unto the divine, unto your God. And I just took him literally when he said that. Like, I don't want to mess up and then get to heaven and he'd be like, yo, what'd you do to me? Like, look, I did this, I did basic income, I did exonerate. Like, I'm really not playing. So I think for me, all of this is motivated by a real spiritual dimension. And I as an imperfect person do try to align my work in pursuit of these perfect ideals. I think that's what a spiritual person, a believer, a disciple should do. And I think that I mean, God is on the side of economic justice. Like literally in the Old Testament, like every 7 years, they would just clear debt, like Jubilee. Like, all right, it's been 7 years. All right, we're gonna start over, or like leave some, pick your crops, but leave something to fill for folks who don't have any. Like it's so clear to me that like God is a God of abundance. He's not a God of hierarchy. He's not a God that thinks some people are better than those people. He's a God who's like, I put enough on this world. Y'all got to figure out how to share. But there's enough here. And I'm telling you to do it. Now, if you don't do it, that's between me and you. So I don't want it. We're probably have a lot of conversations. I don't want one of the conversations to be, I was taking money from poor people. I was being greedy. I don't want to be the dude that has to go through the eye of the needle. Nah. I want to make sure that I'm doing my part to create this beloved community, excuse me, to create thy kingdom come on, your will be done in earth as in heaven. Like, I think economic justice is a part of that will.
Yeah, and I think one of the difficulties is realizing that the beloved community encompasses all of us, and that the better you do, the better I do. The more you have, the more I have. It's a collective. It's a shared burden that we all have.
It's a community. Like, it's not just like individual. Let's get a house with a big fence. It's like, no, like we're a community. Like, we shouldn't need to fence each other out because everyone got something. You don't need fences when folks have nothing.
Yeah, I mean, that's very powerful, and I think that's an excellent surmise of even the conversation is that I think even as we're reckoning with crime and poverty in the U.S., that the issue is that people don't feel like they have enough. And if they don't feel like they have enough, they are going to the most extreme ways to try to get something for them and their families in order for them to survive. And ultimately, people feel that they have to be loyal to their immediate community, which is your family, which is your children and their loved ones. And so they will do whatever they feel is necessary to make sure they have what they need. And so I think, again, we're having larger conversations about violence. The root of violence for a lot of these issues is economic inequality and this racial wealth gap that we are seeing that is happening today. So, Michael, this has been an incredible conversation. You've been incredibly insightful, and your work, obviously, it speaks for itself, and the work that you've done has impacted already thousands and millions of people. And we are very excited to see you as you move forward and continue to change the world for the better every single day.
Kind words, brother. And thank you for all you guys are doing at the King Center, what you're doing in particular in elevating a conversation and all of our consciousness on incredibly important issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, y'all, this is the ReThink podcast. This is what we do. These are the kind of conversations that we have. Mayor Michael Tubbs is excellent communicator, thinker, very innovative. And if you want to learn more about what he is doing, make sure you follow him on social media. Make sure that you're buying his book. Make sure you're investing in the things that he is doing. The King Center ReThink podcast is here so that especially millennial and Gen Z generation have an opportunity to learn about critical issues that are affecting them and that will be affecting their future, and giving you the tools necessary to address these issues with the nonviolent strategies and tools that Dr. King and other leaders have utilized over the course of their lifetime. And again, if you want to get connected to the King Center, you can follow us at thekingcenter.org. You can also check us out on Instagram, on Twitter. And if you have any questions, please contact us. We would love to find out how we could help you. My name is Cameron Friend, host of the ReThink podcast. And look, we will see y'all on the other side. See you soon.